Indonesia's government are showing their commitment to shift towards a more sustainable and greener economy. But in doing so, Indonesia faces many challenges in achieving this transition. Metro TV's Sara spoke with Andhyta Firselly Utami to discuss Indonesia's current and future pathway for a green economy.
As we face environmental challenges and catastrophes that is caused by climate change and the unsustainable practices conducted by humans, we now often hear the term green economy and also green growth. But how can Indonesia especially shift and also implement its economic practices? And how can actually being green and economical go hand in hand? We have with us on Jakarta Movers and Shakers, Andhyta Firselly Utami, or AFU, an environmental economist and also Think Policy Society co-founder. Hello, AFU, how are you?
Hi, Sarah. I'm great. Thanks. Such a pleasure to be here.
Likewise, thank you for being with us and taking your time. So, Afu, we now often hear the Indonesian government, especially, is saying how important it is for us to implement a green economy model. But can you please tell us, especially to our viewers here, what does green economy actually means, and also what does it encompass?
Yeah, that's a great first question. First of all, one of the main misconceptions about green economy is that it's as if it's a choice, right? Like you can choose different colors of economy, and like green economy is just one model. When in reality, green economy should be the default given all of the catastrophes, environmental challenges that we're seeing today. There are different definitions of green economy, different scopes, but I think in the simplest term, it should encompass three things. So first is it has to be low carbon, meaning that in order to generate significant growth, we need to opt for the lowest carbon pathway possible. This means, opting for renewable energy, allocating our land resources, natural resources in a way that doesn't generate carbon dioxide emissions. Secondly, it should also be resource efficient. This means that, in order to generate for each output of economy, you want to use as little resources as possible. And then finally, and this is also inseparable, is it has to be socially inclusive. So it's not a green economy when you grow and you protect the environment, but in doing so, you're actually excluding marginalized groups, vulnerable communities. They should also be at the center of how you design and model the economy.
And why now? Why is Indonesia now starting the discussion or starting to talk more about becoming a green economy? Why is it so important at this moment? And from your perspective right now, how is Indonesia's current economic model, especially regarding its energy production, and how is it affecting our environment, especially?
Yeah, if you ask me, I would say that we should have been thinking about green economy 10, 20 years ago. So we're kind of already somewhat late, but part of the momentum and the urgency, I think, starts to build up since, first of all, the Paris Agreement in 2015. So that's when over 190 countries in the world agreed that we should move or opt for a low carbon development pathway in order to keep global warming under 1.5 degrees Celsius, right? We have already been experiencing a lot of natural disasters, increasingly more frequent and more intensive from year to year. In Indonesia, for example, we already see the fires, big forest and peatland fires in 2015 and 19. We've seen increasing frequency of flood over the years. So we realized that there is something wrong with our economic model, that it's resulting in all of this, natural disasters coming from climate change. But the second big momentum, perhaps, also is the pandemic, right? I think a lot of experts already show us how part of the reason why the virus, if I'm not a virologist, I'm not going to pretend like I understand. But it has something to do with what we did to the ecosystem, right? And I think it gave kind of this unique space where we can rethink about when we want to regrow the economy, as it just has been going through a crisis, how we want to build it. Like, how can we build it better than before? So not just going back to how it was before March 2020, but transitioning towards a better model now that we have the space and time to rethink. The latest IPCC report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this is a global panel of scientists, climate scientists. The recent report that they just published this year has identified that we have very limited time to actually remain in this or limit the impact of global warming. We have barely 9 years left to actually, go lower our emissions very steep towards net zero by the end of the decade, or for some countries in the next few decades. So that's why it's even more urgent now than ever. And in terms of how Indonesia can transition, it really is a question of it's almost like a chicken and egg question, right? Because at the end of the day, if the government is waiting for some kind of signal, coming from the outside, coming from the private sector is waiting for a signal and regulatory certainty from the government that yes, Indonesia is going to opt for a green economy pathway. So I think in terms of how, first of all, we need a strong political commitment that actually translates into real action, and this means opting for the kind of laws and regulations and policy that shows consistency with this climate target, right? And actually allowing for new green investments to come in and to help, especially the energy sector, to transition towards renewable energy. And I think just based on current observation, there is, encouraging commitments coming from the government. Of course, we have the emissions reduction target under Indonesia's nationally determined contribution of 29% unconditional target and 41% conditional target by 2030. And in the renewable energy sector, we do have this 23% renewable energy mix target. But I think sometimes there is mixed signals being sent by the government when, for example, there is still a plan to build new coal power plants which are not renewable in the next couple of years, for example. So this duality of targets and like policy sometimes makes it hard, perhaps even for the private sector, to really prioritize transition towards renewable energy.
Okay, then what can the government do to actually implement and also make this a reality? Because there's, as you said, they're already talking about it, they have taken steps, but is it enough? And what can we do to accelerate the process?
Yeah, so globally, starting from Bill Gates, all the billionaires and big investors actually have started to think about how investments can go towards, transitioning towards green economy, right? If you see the trend of green investments, of ESGs, or environment, social, and governance investments, the number has significantly multiplied over the years. So there is that understanding. Now, for the government of Indonesia to invite a lot of those investments in and actually transition and create new jobs, green jobs, right? We need to really say, Indonesia is open for business. We need to, tell the international investors that yes, we are open for green economy type of business model, and that they can invest in Indonesia.
And what about the circular economic practices in Indonesia? Are we starting the practices already? And if yes, do we need to improve? And if not, how can we start implementing the circular economic practices?
Yes, I think in Indonesia, it's still very nascent. It's still very early to tell. We can see that there's a few first movers, let's say business leaders, who are trying to opt for this, who are thinking about, how to package better, or creating a system where consumers can put back the packaging and they can, reuse it again. I think, we know some of these brands already around us. But I think the challenge here is to level the playing field, because when you see first mover businesses like this, trying to do it voluntarily, if it affects their competitiveness, if it creates a gap, when the other companies can still do what they want and not opt for like a circular economy model, then consumers oftentimes will still opt for the cheaper product, right? So this will make their product not competitive. So again, this goes back to the public policy intervention. The government could level the playing field by actually introducing regulations that are promoting extended producer responsibility, for example, so that it incentivizes or disincentivizes companies from not thinking about how to do their businesses better. And I must say that in the case of Indonesia, we do have a target already. For example, in terms of reducing marine debris, we have some regulations that are aiming or promoting reduced waste and also around extended producer responsibility. I think, as is true in all of the policy targets in Indonesia, it's a matter of implementation and consistency across the board. Because sometimes you have this target, but elsewhere you see there's loopholes and reasons for some of the other players to not comply with.
Indonesia also has dilemmas, especially in balancing its economic performances and also environmental consciousness. For example, as you mentioned before, regarding coal and also crude palm oil is also our main exporting products, but it's also viewed negatively by people and especially other countries in the European Union. Do you think that Indonesia should shift further away from CPO, or do you think with our economic condition, we have no choice?
Yeah, I think the answer would be a little bit more complicated than shifting away or not shifting away. I think the mental model is, transitioning, and also, it's also about intensifying production, for example, in existing areas. So the problem with palm oil is not palm oil per se; it's that we are converting our forests to produce palm oil. Palm oil itself is not a bad commodity, right? It's the trade-off of all the carbon emissions you're releasing, the ecosystem loss, the habitat loss from converting forests from or towards palm oil, right? So I think in the case that you're asking for, I think it's a matter of how the priority is about how Indonesia can conserve and maintain and manage our remaining primary forests, this like lush, green remaining forests that are contributing a lot to reducing climate change. And secondly, how can we incentivize more companies to opt for like green projects? And I want to shift here to the discussion around carbon markets and the potential that Indonesia can tap into from the carbon market, because I think right now, globally, countries towards COP26 in Glasgow, countries are thinking about an international cooperation model where countries with different levels of efficiency in reducing emissions can trade among themselves or can cooperate and support each other towards meeting the Paris Agreement targets, right? And a big potential that more and more people are talking about now is nature-based solutions, and in this case, forests, peatlands, mangroves, and all of this. Because when we talk about green economy and low carbon growth, the focus has been on transitioning towards renewable energy, which is of course critical, and it's the default that needs to happen. But part of accelerating and increasing the possibility to actually meet Paris Agreement is by basically restoring forests, planting more trees and mangroves and all of these nature-based solutions that will basically sink the carbon emissions together or hand in hand with the transition towards renewable energy.
With the competitiveness of new and renewable energy, how ready is Indonesia to adopt new and renewable energy itself, especially when seeing the industrial sector right now?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a chicken and egg situation. Indonesia will be ready if the government leads the way. It's kind of like saying, like, if the government is waiting for Indonesia to be ready, we will never be ready because of inertia and sunk costs. Given all of the investments we've already put into coal power plants or coal production, we will feel like we're not ready. But really, when we see that the government as the leader of this transition, open the pathway, then we can actually save or avoid a lot of losses from stranded assets. And I'm saying this in terms of, for example, the need. So some countries end up having to retire their coal power plants early, right, because of this need, the climate change target, and all of that. So really, if we say that we are ready now and the regulation supports that, we can save a lot of money from avoiding, building new coal power plants that we will have to retire early anyway. So might as well put all of that investments into already renewable, energy options today instead of waiting 2 or 5 more years.
Okay, then what suggestions do you have to the Indonesian government, especially in accelerating and also making a smoother transition to a new and renewable energy resources?
Yeah, I think the firstly is make sure that all of the regulations are consistent towards one goal. So if the target is to push for renewable energy, make sure that from the fiscal policy, from the sectoral policy, the other sectors policy that will affect that will have substitutive effects on renewable energy, for example, are all consistent and sending the same message out there. So make sure that again we are saying that Indonesia is open for business in terms of green investments. Part of for example, the omnibus law is kind of sending mixed signals, and like some investors are actually not happy with how the environmental regulation under the omnibus law is somewhat made more vague, or like some would say more relaxed, right? So this is what I mean by sending mixed signals, right? Like if we do care about green economy and we want to transition, then it has to be, the policy needs to be bold, to be strong, and to be consistent, and sending a clear message out there.
All right, Alpha, we don't have the opportunity again to wait. We have to start now, take actions. And we do hope to see more measures and actions taken by all stakeholders, as you said, especially in the effort to overcome the economic, environmental impact for humans and also the society as a whole. Thank you very much, Afu, Andhyta Firselly Utami, environmental economist, and also Think Policy Society co-founder, for joining us on Jakarta Movers and Shakers.